before you even manufacture is to having somebody hold the product, you have to be able to win a pitch competition and make them understand it. That's freaking insane, right? So I always tell people we had to raise up until now $30,000 of non-dilutive funding in the last 12 months through pitch competitions, through grants, through research, and all that.
All right, welcome to the Brew. I'm your host, Valtteri Salamäki. Today, I'm joined by my co-host, Luis, as well as our special guest today. We got Abhishek Sastri, who is the founder of FLUIX LLC, and we're going to be talking about what is Hardtech, as that's something that a lot of people don't know about. Then we're going to deep dive into what you're doing with your startup company, and then we're going to talk about esports and the growth of it and the potential for startups and everything else when it comes to that world. But before we get started, I just want to have a little quick introduction from you, Abhi. So tell us a little bit about your background and what you're currently working on.
Yeah, sure thing. So first of all, thank you guys so much for having me on. My name is Abhi, just like Val just said. I love playing video games. So you asked about my background and people always go to, their college and stuff like that, which is great. I love playing video games, love playing basketball, love hanging out with friends. I guess, a little bit of my background is I love building things and solving technical problems. I'm an aerospace engineer by trade, and currently I'm the co-founder and CEO of FLUIX LLC. And what we do is solve technical problems when it comes to cooling down electronics. So Hardtech startup is something that we're familiar with. We're not experts in it. We're currently going through the paces of creating one. And I guess I just want to share the struggle and share some of the insight, and I'd love some feedback from the community too.
Absolutely, yeah. So today, the reason why we're talking about Hardtech is because there's a lot of misconceptions about different types of startups, right? Like, so in the startup world, first of all, startups are not only just tech. I think that's a big misconception that's out there, is that if you build a startup, it has to be tech. That's not true. Tech obviously gets invested into heavily. But even in tech, there's different types of tech. And if you hear the word tech startup, that's usually a software startup. And software startups are a lot easier to do. It requires less capital. You can build it faster. You can do it all in-house. It's easier to get investment, all those factors which we'll talk about. But then we got hard tech. And hard tech is around hardware or something that is out of materials. And it's a lot harder because you have to first prototype, design, create supply chains. And today, as both of us are struggling and kind of going through this process, I think it's a better lens of us talking about us going through it than somebody just saying that this is how hard tech works and this is how it is, because it's hard to conceive the struggles of it. It's honestly a really, really hard battle to build a hard tech company. So to get started, so as I brought up, like hard tech is based off materials, it's hardware. What was the first steps of getting you started into Hardtech? What made you want to go into this beast of its own of a Hardtech startup?
It's funny you bring up that question. If anyone asks me now what you should major in college, I always say two things. Either don't go to college and start drop shipping, or become a computer programmer. And I did not become a computer programmer. So the funniest thing is what got me into Hardtech solutions is I think these hands that I have, I'm the guy that you bring to a museum and you basically yell at me because I'm touching everything. So that's where the passion for it started. I remember a quick story for the passion for Hardtech that I had in high school. That there was a project that we had to do at the end of high school. I think it was like at the end of sophomore year, actually, where we had to do a personal project. My personal project made no sense at all. It's comparing the internal systems of a computer, of my PS2, with the internal organs of a living creature. So like CPU, the brain, the heart, all of those systems. And I basically took apart my PS2, left all the parts out, and my dog came and ate a vital component, which was the plug-in adapter. So my PS2 doesn't even work anymore. So you can see that I was always trying to learn and take stuff apart, especially stuff that came into gaming. Where I specifically came into the aspect of hardware is when I realized that working on, whether it's electronics or cars or anything, if you have the ability to work on something, visualize it, and touch and feel it, it's just another dimension that makes you, I guess, I don't want to make it weird, but it kind of romanticizes you with that technology. And that always appealed with me. So my start really came when I went to uni. and when I met my advisor, my business partner now, Eduardo, and it really came by as I wanted to create a solution with cooling down computers that was not just a solution in software, because I had no knowledge. So when it came to hardware, it was just something easy for me, and I could easily transition to it. But easy for me, but I don't want to say it has been easy so far. Like you said, it's been tough.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of want to go into the pains of building a hardware company. I mean, both of us are going through the process, and I think the struggle where a lot of hard tech companies go to is not only just initial capital, but growth capital. Because when you start a hardware company, as I brought up, you actually need a lot of money up front. Aside from a software like a tech company, you can code all to your heart's delight, and you can develop software. You just need the skill sets. You can get a group of friends in the CS department, and you can have an idea and start building it out. But for a hard tech startup, you need physical components. You need to buy these things. You need to test out these things. You have to do research behind it. And it gets very expensive, just even the early stages, before you even have anything you can sell into the market. So how was that process for you? Like, as for me, for Sound Research, it's been brutal. Like, we were in the early stage, we're like, okay, we need this much capital just to even make this new technology, even a prototype, like even a show that it works, right? So how was that process for you? How did you get that capital? How much did it cost? Was there a lot of learning curves? Did your first product even work? Like, those are questions I have for Hardtech for you.
Yeah, man, a great question. I kind of want to go into this, and you'll understand, and you understand this, and I love talking to you about this because you'll find my story funny, because basically we had to be scrappy and lucky. So a little bit more insight on what FLUIX does, our company. We create the world's first multi-inlet water block. So if anyone's a computer enthusiast or build custom liquid cooling solutions, our patent pending technology basically allows increased rate of heat transfer for people that are looking for a little bit more performance. But also with the multi-inlet water block, it's a new aesthetic, a new unique setup, especially for PC gamers who are looking for that type of personality or customizing their computer. So before we did all this, to raise that money to build the very first prototype, you gotta be scrappy as hell. So I always tell people from our university, using programs like the like the I-Corps program from the NSF, pitch competitions, basically your mouth has to be able to run to explain someone an idea before you even manufacture it. Imagine how tough that is. And you know this, Val. Before you even manufacture it, to having somebody hold the product, you have to be able to win a pitch competition and make them understand it. That's freaking insane, right? So I always tell people we had to raise, up until now, $30,000 of non-dilutive funding in the last 12 months through pitch competitions, through grants, through research, and all that. And I do want to give a shout out to these people. I'm not going to name them, but your mom, your pop, your cousin, some people that you have good relationships with. You do have to pull some money from there just to be scrappy. But even if you don't want to be dependent on people, I bet if you look around your room right now, and I'm sure people have different situations and I want to be at, but I bet if you look at your room right now, if you want to live the minimalistic lifestyle, you could sell half of your shit to start your Hardtech company. So that's kind of where I hope that gives insight on where we started.
I don't know, man. My novelty Blu-ray collection is my prized possession. So I don't know if I'm too ready to give that up just yet. You know, I don't know where I'd be without my Princess Bride special edition Blu-ray.
I love that you said that. I have some Yu-Gi-Oh cards that I should be selling, like from the gameplay Yu-Gi-Oh, but I haven't sold yet.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta keep them, you know.
Right. Yeah. No, you gotta keep some of your prized possessions. But I mean, you brought up a good point, which is like, first you have to believe in your own vision of what you're trying to do. And if you can't believe in your own vision, how are you going to explain that to somebody else? Like, you have to be able to present that to somebody else. And I do agree that's probably the hardest part in a hard tech startup in the early stages, is just explaining to people what is the first thing you're going to get. What is this product? What is this something that you're going to be able to hold? Because I still remember about a year from today at CES, when I presented about Edge Sound Research, I had to explain people the concept of feeling sound in a device, and nobody's ever really experienced that before unless you had sub-pack or Woozer and a low frequency. And just seeing people's faces, I'm just like, I hope they get what I'm trying to say. Like, I gave a reference point of Jurassic Park, but I mean, it's hard to conceptualize. So for you, when it came to coolant systems, right, did you try to show like this is some other things that exist in the market, this is how ours is different? Like, were you trying to make those comparison points, or how were you trying to make people conceptualize this hardware that you were creating?
First of all, I just want to say you talked about edge sound at CES. That's freaking cool. I love how you nonchalantly said that. That's freaking awesome. Great question. So kind of our story, we've pivoted a lot in our company in the short time of our company. In 2017, when the idea of our company really started with cooling systems, if you guys can remember, cryptocurrency was a craze. People were building their miners, getting their RX 480s. I was guilty of it too. And they built all these miners, and they were starting to build mining farms, partnering up with an older person who had some money to build a warehouse. In Florida, it's hot as hell. So the frustration that we found is these raggedy mining farms that opened up, they had to spend a lot of money on the infrastructure of the warehouse to basically create an HVAC cooling system. That cost a lot of money. So my whole idea is, I noticed that my friend was mining cryptocurrency, and we changed out an air cooler for a liquid cooler and saw a 5% increase in hash rate. Very simple. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. So I was like, instead of these people spending out, because the volatility of the crypto market, instead of people spending thousands of dollars changing out their warehouse farms, you don't know where this is going to go. Why don't you install a plug and play solution on each server, on each mining farm? Mm-hmm. So we basically created a prototype, a GPU water block for each GPU rack that someone can buy off of us. We got some traction. So that's kind of where it started with the whole cooling systems. And I say this because me and my co-founder, I'm an aerospace engineer. I was going through my bachelor's degree, not the best academically, let me just say that. But my co-founder, he was doing his PhD in mechanical engineering and had his, he basically was really in tune and was an expert in fluid dynamics and heat transfer. That's what he was doing research in the laboratory for. Our tech had nothing to do with the research he was doing, which was metal 3D printing. But I went to him and I was like, can we increase the efficiency or the performance of these coolers for these crypto miners? And he was like, why not? So the first thing we did, we applied for UCF Corp's program. And let me do a quick time warp to 6 months after that. Yeah, the idea failed. The idea crashed. And I think you guys might know why, because our idea, the need or the frustration of the problem we're solving with cooling down GPU miners was eerily similar to the curve price of Bitcoin. As soon as Bitcoin dropped, no one wanted to buy our cooling solutions. So we basically had to pivot. And the next pivot we did was we did the customer discovery process, went back to those miners, and they're like, hey, we don't really have a need for this anymore, man. Great try. Oh, by the way, but you guys build cooling solutions? We use all gaming parts. When I go home, I just take gaming parts off of my miner. I'm playing video games on a PC that I built. And then that's how we naturally transitioned to gamers and started learning more about that.
Got it. One thing just for our audience, because like I said, I'm gonna ask you guys for layman's terms, just so people, if they don't understand about different terminology. So what is the use case of a GPU? Just so people understand, like GPUs, why they were so sold out, like automatically for mining and all these kinds of things. What is the purpose of a GPU?
Sure, and please chime in, because I know other people know about cryptocurrency, but from my understanding, a GPU, a graphics card, basically renders the image on the screen. So whatever your screen that you're seeing now, a graphics card does it. And a graphical, basically the images that you're seeing on your screen is mathematical algorithms, mathematical equations that you're seeing right now. So my hand movements, everything that's going on. So a GPU, when you're mining cryptocurrency, the GPU is highly efficient in doing those mathematical processes, because on the blockchain, whenever you're vouching for a transaction, the GPU is the best type of hardware to do that, because it's already good in doing these highly complex mathematical equations, and it can equate to mining cryptocurrency, or basically what you're doing when you're mining cryptocurrency is you're verifying transactions on the blockchain. So that's why people bought these graphical hardware tech. And the way I explained it, I'm not a GPU expert or anything like that, so please do your own research, but that's a way that I can kind of explain a little of the knowledge I knew. But these components were definitely getting hot. I mean, you walked into a warehouse where you're mining GPU in the heyday, I say, and it's kind of the heyday now, you would get slapped in the face with the amount of heat that was coming off of these makeshift servers, if you will.
Got it. I mean, one interesting thing about GPUs, and I want to hear from both your perspectives. While this was going on, how was building your PCs? Because I know that literally GPUs were like the most expensive thing in the world, and it was impossible to find ones that a lot of people wanted for their own PCs. And anybody who invested into companies that created GPUs, stock market wise, you made a lot of money real quick because everything was sold out. So how was the process of building out computers during this time?
I mean, Luis, if you want to go first. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
That's really it, man. It just fucking sucked. It's reminiscent of what it's like now, except this time it's just Nvidia being idiots and not producing as much as they could. And obviously, like COVID and all this stuff kind of played a role in how much they're actually being able to produce and all that stuff. But no, yeah, it was off, man. Like a 5800, not 5800, a 580 from AMD. Back in those days, like the stronger GPUs, you couldn't find them at all. Strangely enough, NVIDIA cards were a lot easier to find than AMD cards. I think that might have just been because maybe the AMD was a bit more efficient with actual mining, but it was still pretty hard. Getting like a 1070 like Ti was damn near impossible. Just tough. Kind of again similar to what it's like now, but for different reasons. Now it's like I feel like if you're building a mining rig nowadays, you're dumb. Like the return on your investment nowadays is not going to be as good as it was back in the day.
You make $152 a day on average if you have a mining rig, compared to you were able to make, what was it, like $1,500 a day. So it's like it dropped down by 10x value, and the cost to create the rig is like $5,000. So your return is like months until you even make your money back from even building the rig in the first place. So yeah, it's been kind of crazy how to transition around.
That's why back in the day, someone would buy a solution for me because they were making that return. So now it definitely doesn't make sense. And Louis, you brought up a great point, is because, you know, back in the day, it was funny. Yes, it was tough finding these cards because miners figured out a way that you can use NVIDIA's full product line for whatever you're mining, right? You could use an RX 480, 580 for when you're going after Bitcoin, Ethereum. But if you're doing Litecoin or some, I don't know if it was Litecoin, but some of the lighter coins to mine, you could use a GTX 1050 Ti. And I walked in these miners, and the funniest thing is these guys, and some were really good friends of mine, they used NVIDIA's full product line. So even the budget gamers couldn't get a GPU, and even the mid-range or even the high range. And nowadays, I think it might have shifted. I might be wrong, but I feel like most people are going after those high range, so you can still find those mid-range cards, 1650, 1660 Ti. And on the AMD side, which are compelling GPUs, I think the 5000 series, the 5500 XT and stuff like that. So I'm glad it shifted a little bit. And, you know, for people that build PCs like we do, one side of our business, we build custom liquid cooled PCs. And we have a form that we're changing every single day because our product page basically has an AMD Radeon 5600 XT. But some days we have the ability to go to the 5700 XT, and some days we have to kind of dial back. So we have to figure that out. So if anyone out there knows a partner that we can contact or someone that's looking, we don't have the best MOQs, but maybe we can get a minimum order up there. I guess might as well do my shameless plug now.
Yeah.
Always do it. That's the entrepreneur way, man.
I feel like, honestly, like these people are going more for a 3080s now than anything, just because, man, what I would do to get my hands on a 3080, it's like I could, realistically speaking, like if I wanted to, I could have a 3090 in my hands within a week. But am I really going to spend twice as much money for twice as much RAM? When like in reality, like it's like what I'm really after isn't the RAM, it's the actual output, the CPU power. When like, nah, I'm probably not going to do that. You know, it's like, and 3070 is fine, but you can't find those anywhere. The 3060, that's for sure. I think that's in February. But that's, you know, I guarantee you it's going to be impossible to get that damn thing when it drops. So 3080 is like, I'm a part of like 2 discords that just show like restocks, and it's like 3090s for days, but it's never showing 3080s back in stock.
I feel you there, and you hit the nail on the head for me on there. I'm on like 4 live streams right now on Twitch. We're going over stocks, and I'm like messaging.
It'll show you the Excel sheet,
right, and then it's like a mini community, and it's funny you bring this up because you guys will find this funny. When the 3070 and 3080 dropped, there was YouTube videos from Bitwit Kyle, some other people that YouTube videos, little colonies of people with the wait in front of a micro center. and they created their own sense of government rules to get these cards. Like, hey guys, sign my Google Sheet, like type in your name. There were some battles of people skipping lines. It's a whole notion. A GPU dropped, like, hey, I'm in line, can you watch my spot where I go take a piss real quick and I'll be right back? Oh yeah, can you sign my Google form? I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, let's do it. So I love when there's a goal in mind, the PC community comes together and we get it done. I absolutely love that. I thought that was the funniest thing too.
My sister, her and her boyfriend, he was building a PC and he got like a 3070, I think. Not 3070, a 2070. Excuse me. He got a 2070 Super. So he didn't really care. He wasn't really he didn't want the newest stuff. But I remember she called me the day that the 3080 dropped, and they went to Micro Center that morning, and they didn't know that it dropped that morning. So they went early in the morning, and she was like, "Do you know why there was a massive line at Micro Center, and why like?" She's like, she's like, it didn't affect us. She's like, we just walked through because they asked us, "Oh, are we here for this product?" And we said no, so they just let us go through because we weren't there for that. And I was like, what do you mean? And she's like, yeah, there was like a massive line. I was like, yeah, the new graphics cards dropped. And she was like, oh, is that like something special? And I was like, I mean, there's a line out the freaking door to Micro Center in like La Habra. So yeah, I think it's it's pretty wild.
The Lord of the Flies situations that they're I love hearing those stories.
Yeah, no, I love this conversation about just in general about the demand about these different products for PC computing and everything, for GPUs and also CPUs and everything else that you need to build a PC, because that goes into the process of you building your company, right? Because as you said, you pivoted away. You're first, you have to like understand the market goes, and you were really tied into all these Discord channels, understanding everything about the market, which you have to be if you're trying to build a startup. But then, as you said, you started moving your business towards a different market, right? So as you were going through that pivot function, and understanding kind of what these new needs are and trying to go into that, was there additional costs involved? Was it hard to think of how to build partnerships? Did you have to change like what you were researching? Pretty much you didn't, obviously. But what was that process now that you had to pivot? Like, you clearly understand that market and you researched the crap out of it. Was it an easy transition, or did you have a lot of learning pains as you were going through it?
Yeah, still have the bruises. So yeah, that's a great question. And one thing I want to make sure right now, because it kind of resonated with me, is when you're doing a pivot, it's freaking okay. Like, I'm not saying that just to offer a piece of advice or seem like I'm better than no. I'm just saying I had to say that to myself every single morning, because I was like, damn, I thought we really had this down. And then we had to change. So I told myself it's freaking okay, because I wanted to make sure this one thing, and the National Science Foundation, I-Corps program, and entrepreneurs fundamentally understand this. You don't want to be a solution going after a problem. Yep. You want to have a problem and find a solution for it. So when we did that pivot, we were really close to, we had a solution that worked for the other people that we made because they had a problem. But now we're like, oh shit, we have a solution. We did all this R&D. We built these products. We poured our own money into it. What the hell do we do? But thank God, thankfully, I was going out there like talking to people, hey, and trying to sell, but I was nowhere near the selling aspect. And one thing I can do very well, and which I need to work on, but it comes to my benefit, is I can run my mouth. If there's anything I can do, if there's a run your mouth battle, I'm there. But that's kind of bad, especially when you're pivoting, because we want it to be a problem. We want to find a problem and go after solutions. So the cost associated with the pivot was a lot of mental energy. The second thing, the cost that we had to associate, is we had to find a problem. So this is a great point. I want to bring this up, because gamers, compared to cryptocurrency miners run it as a business. So they're associating the performance of the product to the cost. Mm-hmm. Gamers are willing to spend that extra money, and there's budget gamers, medium gamers, and gamers that go after high end, but they're willing to spend an extra money if they have brand loyalty, aesthetics, or if Jay's 2 cents, Linus Tech Tips, or Bitwig Kyle, or Gamers Nexus said something good about the product, they're down to do it. So two things are brand loyalty, and the blessing of a tech reviewer, and we are figuring out that right now. Like, our water blocks are great, but compared to, and these are great companies, EK, Water Blocks, Optimus, they make great blocks too. If you're not hearing it from Linus, Jay's 2 cents, or Gamers Nexus, you're not going to go to FLUIXengineering.com and buy our products at a premium. even if we're claiming that our products are better performance, because we got to put our money where our mouth is. And that's kind of where we're going. So I ask the community now, I mean, reaching out to these tech reviewers with a claim that our product is better is great, because then they can put a thumbnail on a YouTube video. FLUIX Engineering startup claims their product is 15% better. And Linus is going to try to debunk that, which is great for us, because we would love that feedback, right? Because even if it's not better, we're like, okay, no worries, Linus. Thank you so much again. Let me come back in a month and beat that claim.
I love that you say that, because so often you run into like the two sides, right? The two arguments are like either you're someone who just sends a reviewer, or somebody who has a tech following, or anybody really, a product that aligns with a certain demographic you're trying to hit, right? And oftentimes, especially for startups, you're in a situation where like the product, the way they test it, maybe it doesn't live up to the claims that you have. There's two ways you can react to that, and two ways that people have reacted to that. One way, that the bad way to react to it, is basically telling the tech reviewer to fuck off, and that what they're saying, is, oh, they're wrong, they didn't test it right. Like all this bullcrap, right? Like when it's like, you didn't test my product correctly. Like these are the ways that you should have tested my product. But then the good way of doing the way that you mentioned here is to keep an open dialogue with these reviewers, and be like, hey, any notes, any input that you might have, let us know that, and then we can go ahead and make some adjustments. Especially, and you mentioned Linus Tech Tips, and I think you mentioned him specifically for a reason, because they have Alex on the team, who's like, he actually like CNCs their blocks. Yeah, he's an engineer. He actually CNCs blocks for them and everything like that. So yeah, man, I think it's great that that's already your mindset going into this, and I think that is a huge separation between someone who, like you mentioned, is simply solving the problem versus or has a solution for a problem, versus someone who's hunting for the solution to a problem. And I think that's a good mindset to have on that.
Right, and you're definitely right. And I'm not going to sit here like it's not going to hurt, because Linus Tech Tips telling you that your product shit, it's going to hurt. I'm not going to say that it doesn't, but my goal at the end of the day, and I think our team understands this, we want to humbly serve, and because we care about enthusiasts, we want to provide a product that someone will actually put on their rig. So yeah, we definitely want to follow back if a scenario like that were to happen, and the costs associated with that, because we don't know if Linus will ask for for an amount to do those testing. He might not. I think he probably will. The cost to ship, another conversation. I could talk hours about costs, but I think that'll be a negative conversation. I want to keep it. But everything with a hard tech startup, with a hardware company, you have costs everywhere. So
especially starting up.
Yeah, I mean, like as you brought up, like there's cost of prototypes, there's the cost of sending it to people. All those factors matter, but at the end of the day, what is the most important thing is that user feedback, and then the creation of something. Because if you're building a hardware company, and I think you really said it well, it's like if you're sending the product to somebody and you get reviews, it's gonna hurt, but you can't take that as like, I'm right, they're wrong, and like screw you, and like well, obviously look at why they're saying that and all these kinds of things. Is how are you going to build this successful venture and get traction for investors and all these other things if you're not willing to listen to the people you're trying to sell it to? And I think two good points on that is like one, which is a good statement that one of our clients, we had this discussion about. It's like, look, if you build a company and you say I like it, but your community is saying the other thing, unless you're buying every single one of your products, shut up and listen to the community and build it out. Because that is so important, because at the end of the day, you're not the one buying the product, your community is the one buying the product. And then the second part of it, which is what you talked about for building your idea, and you don't want to chase just like one problem and try to create a solution for it. One of the guests we had on the show before, Xavier, who I was talking about, the supply chain automation company ARCS, had a really good conversation with him this week, actually. And one thing we were talking about was, okay, so when you're building a company, right? Instead of you thinking of one problem, think of macro. Think of the big scale, and then from there, split that macro problem into a bunch of smaller problems, and then take that micro and then make it smaller, and then see where you can start with. But you have to understand the scope of where you're going for it, because if you don't do that, you're going to go into this this weird mindset of thinking that my solution is going to make me a bunch of money, investors will care, I'm going to be the best in this market, blah, 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 blah. But then you can't get further than that. And I know like that's one thing we've talked about before is when you build a hardware company, it's hard to get investment because it's way more risky for an investor. You need a lot more capital. So many things can go wrong. You have to think of the supply chain, the packaging, if there's defect products, all these things you have to consider.
Quality control is
All
like
quality assurance.
You know, people don't know when you sell a product, because we are figuring this out right now. When you sell a product to a B2B customer, you have to insure that. So a lot of people, when they figure out their COGS and their financial statements, are like, oh, my bill of materials is this. Yes, I'm paying someone $15 an hour minimum wage to assemble this, blah, blah, blah. Oh shit, I have to insure this, and the insurance is more than my profit margin. Holy crap. And that's what we had to figure out. You freaking bring it up, bro, like so well, because whenever I go to these pitch competitions and I'm, whenever I'm up against another company, right? Great companies, by the way, great software ideas like 3D virtualization of restaurant menus. We were up against that. I'm like, how the fuck am I going to compare against that? You could literally see a menu, see the texture, see the moisture off of an Angus burger before you go into a restaurant.
Oh,
how the fuck? Or something like that. They were claiming all these crazy stuff, right? Yeah. And then you come to that slide, the bullshit slide, I call it. Do a financial pro forma projection for 5 years. The bullshit slide, right? Which I understand why they asked for it, right? Because they have to. So you have to make a certain assumptions and data points where you have to go about. Now, for a Hardtech company, my revenue that I'm making after 5 years is hopefully gonna look like this, right? Because we all want to look like that. But then when I compare my slide against all those other companies, I'm literally 1/10 of the revenue they're racking in, because just AWS, having your ability to host, where I have to go, if I wasn't, we manufacture our own products in our humble little machine shop, but if I didn't, I had to go partner up with somebody, a manufacturer that does it. But just the ability for a software company, I'm not saying that let me not claim they have it easier, they just have an easier access to that major resource, which is hosting from AWS. Absolutely. When you guys said that, it strung off. You can see the passion I'm talking about, because it strung one of my heartstrings. I'm like, oh shit, I know how that feels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean it's such a struggle, because the investors at the end of the day, like if you want to get capital, and we talked about this before, some hardware companies never get investment. Like they don't get it until they hit like millions of dollars, and then they just get like boost investment, more like a Series A, and then just like for scalability and globalization, but they don't really get it for like early stages. And the reasoning for that is because as you brought, there's a lot of learning pains. There's a lot of these margin, like the margin for a hardware company is minute compared to a software company. Software company, their entire cost structure is based off of labor, and it's easy to make pro forma statements for them too, because you can project that out. You can see how many hours I have to work on this, what is my server cost, and how many people I can get in front of. And that's why they can do the schemes of like get 3 months for free or get the first month for free. They just look at acquisition costs and that's it. Hardware companies, it's like everything, there's a cost. Like we want to break even minimum. We don't want to lose any money on our first sale, and we want to get into the market as quickly as possible. Calculate that.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. I did a $20 off coupon, and it hurt. You know what I mean? And people were like, why can't you offer $20 off? I'm like, I'm trying here, buddy. I really am. You know what I mean? Maybe we can in the future. And I think we can. What I'm saying is, if someone's looking after a FLUIX product, I know we're small, we can possibly later on, but you bring up a great point. I think the story of Instagram, 2012 Instagram, 10 guys in a dorm room with a server in their freaking closet or whatever. Holy crap, the cost for that is low. And of course, I can't compare myself to Instagram. The value Instagram provided is amazing, right? But holy crap, 10 people and a server room, and just bring your old MacBooks and let's get this shit done. That is scalable to a point. You know what? In the next life, I want to do that.
I think the funny thing with software, and again, I go back to the very first point that Val brought up here, where it's like, when people think of startups, they think software, they think SaaS in some way, shape, or form, or they think of like, I don't know, some weird fucking thing, like, an Uber or an Airbnb or something like that, which is still SaaS, but for some reason in their minds, it's a bit more tangible, But these like hardware companies are something that the hard tech companies are something that I think should not be undervalued. And I think that it's different. And obviously, I am not in the hard tech startup scene. That's you too. But I can assume that with software companies, with SaaS-based companies, the goal is to scale, get acquired. Whereas what I would imagine with hard tech companies, the goal might be scale, license, maybe get acquired. But licensing, I think, would be kind of the overall goal with hard tech, because you keep the patents, you keep the technology for yourself, but you're licensing it out if someone ends up wanting to use it. And I think that's kind of the way it is. I mean, obviously some acquisitions will happen, like when Logitech acquired Blue, but I think that's just like this big conglomerate getting Blue because they saw that gaming was going to be a thing.
Yeah.
So they were like, oh, we might as well get them now because we're Logitech and we're already in the gaming scene. The verticals just lined up really well. And I mean, I see that you're wearing a Logitech headset. I don't know if it was before or after the Blue acquisition, but if it was after, it's probably a Blue microphone in there. If it's before, then it's still a Logitech microphone. But it's these kind of goals. But I mean, I want to get kind of insight from the both of you, just on like what is, like, obviously acquisition is the goal for a software company always and forever, to get bought up by one of the fangs. But what is the goal with like actual like hardware companies, like where you're creating something that's tangible and can be touched and held by the consumer?
Do you want to go first, Val? I'm still formulating my thoughts.
Sure, I'll go first. So I mean, it depends. There's a couple factors you got to look at. So early stages for Sound Research, we were thinking of like, let's go the acquisition route. I mean, that's kind of changed as time goes by, because we've realized just like that we can create an actual new audio like vertical, like literally just a completely new space in audio, which is interesting to me because we started looking at parallels like Sony, we started looking at companies like Bose and all these kinds of things, and we realized that instead of getting acquired, we can create strategic partnerships. What you talked about, right? Like, so we can do licensing deals as one part of it. We can create our own product line out of it. And then we can kind of create side verticals that don't have to be hardware. We can create software solutions. We can create all these other things, right? And control that space and then keep scaling it up. I guess the question for acquisition comes more from the founders of how long are they willing to grind out that idea? Because acquisition, a lot of times for an entrepreneur, comes to the point of like, look, I've been grinding this out for 15 years. I just want to retire. Like, I've been doing like 80 hours every single week, and it's time for move it on. But then you have to understand, the second you get acquired, your idea, kind of like your vision, is no longer your vision, right? It's whoever took it over. So there's this kind of like battle that entrepreneurs have of like, this is my baby and I want to hold it on forever, but I'm also grinding this out so that eventually I can reap the benefits of it. But you're still more vision driven, right? Like, I want to change the landscape of audio. That's me and my co-founder Ethan's vision, is like, we want to redefine how you experience sound in every single aspect. It's software solutions as well, hardware solutions. We're just starting with hardware, which is honestly dumb because it's a lot harder and more expensive. But that's where my co-founder's research is based off of. But at the end goal, it comes down to like, acquisition is great and you make that huge sellout, but then your vision's gone. And that's where like I'm bringing up, like, Tesla is a good example of this. So Elon actually tried to sell his company to Apple. A lot of people don't know this. So Tesla in the early stages, and this is a good example of a hard tech company, Tesla struggled. It was going bankrupt like year after year after year, and it was barely making it by. Like, Elon literally had an interview and he said like, I thought I was gonna go bankrupt in this year, I thought I was gonna go bankrupt this year, I thought I was gonna go bankrupt this year. And he tried to set up a meeting with Tim Cook, and Tim Cook didn't take that meeting. Tim Cook had no care about Tesla. He's like, I don't give a shit anymore. But now they're making cars, which I think is absolutely hilarious with Hyundai. But that whole process for Elon, right? He was looking at acquisition as a route out, and that's why he was going that route. But now he's gone to the point where it's investor frenzy and all these things, and I 100% disagree with that. I think it's absolutely ridiculous that he's more valuable than Jeff Bezos, because literally the value of a Tesla car is not equated to that. But that's aside from the point. For Elon's growth, because investors backed it up, his vision kept on growing, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger, and he got more jet fuel behind it. But it's really to that point of an entrepreneur of like, how far can I push this vision to go towards before like I have to sell it out? I have to move on to something else because I can't get this further. Another company can. Another company can then continue the legacy and the vision of it. Because I had conversation with like AR companies, And right when COVID started, they sold their companies because they saw that AR, like during COVID, was not going to succeed. So they sold it to bigger companies, so at least their technology could live and their legacy could continue through it, because they knew they couldn't do it themselves. So it's a hard battle, but hardware companies tend to take longer to build. The founders are involved with it for longer. The acquisition timeline's a lot longer, but the sell point is more of like, this is the end of the road for me, and then let's push it on forwards. But I don't really have a say in this vision anymore. But obviously, I want to hear your take on that same concept.
Bro, like I absolutely, when you said that, I do have to agree. And the one point that I absolutely love is I kind of want to focus on the founding team, right? Because I'm an engineer at heart. So when I'm fucking like rolling down, I'm not saying that I have the understanding or where I look at things. I mean, even this monitor, I'm looking at this bezel, I'm looking at certain things. I'm like, hey, can I change that? Or can I look at that better? And I don't want this to get to an intuition of what I'm trying to do with FLUIX, so whether getting acquired or moving on or licensing or doing different markets. But my co-founder looks at it the same way. Like when we're looking at technology, we're looking at ways of, oh shit, if we can figure out how to manufacture that, oh, this is sandblasted, this is a mold. Okay, can we put an RF stuff? Can we figure this stuff out? And even when looking under a car hood, I'm looking at control arm bushings and all that. I'm looking at ways of changing the framework. And that's a double-edged sword, because that could be like, fuck, I'm working 80 hours a week. In college, I didn't go to any parties or anything because I'm working on my startup. We've heard the story before. So, okay, I want to work my ass off in my 20s and 30s and then retire early, right? That could be a thing. Or if you're an innovator, you can have this idea of I can only speak to what I know, a cooling company, and innovate within that and become a conglomerate like 3M that creates these type of products. It's a double-edged sword. And I love that you asked that, Luis, and I love that you went through it, Val, because with the software company, from what I know, I feel like VC is pushed. Whenever you go to the programs in uni, they're pushing VC. Yeah, you got to pitch your company. Where's your pitch deck? Where's your pitch deck? Fuck a pitch deck. Well, let me just say this. Where is the transaction between a customer? Did someone take their credit card out of their pocket and swipe it on your business, your Stripe? Where is that? Because that inherently provides sometimes more value than your pitch deck. And in the 1960s, when you applied for a small business loan and you started a little mechanic shop, did you have a pitch deck? No, I'm gonna start a mechanic shop. So I'm a little old school when I look at that. And a lot of what I'm saying right now, I know it has holes in it because just the landscape of where things are right now. But with a hardware company, that is why FLUIX is moving B2B right now. Because we're doing the stuff with gamers, but we have a problem that we want to solve, and it's in the same realm of cooling. We feel like we can organically grow through sales, but we got to take the blows right now where we have no money, and we got to take those blows and grow organically. Yeah. But I know there's going to be a time when we come and we're like, shit, this order is too big. We can't do it with the 1 milling machine, the CNC we have right now. We have to outsource. Let's go to a family office in Boca Raton, Florida, and find an investor. Hey, sir, madam, can you drop 100K? Let's make this happen. And I love that you asked that question, Luis, because we're going through it right now. It's like, what do we do with the next stage? So I guess I'd love to follow up with you guys in a month from now and see how it goes.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point here on and I think, again, key differences between reason I asked this is to really hone in on the key difference between like a SaaS company and a hardware company, which is like the path for the most part is pretty clear with a SaaS company. You have an idea, you go get VC, you buy a team basically with your VC capital, you build the team, you build your tech, you build your engineers, and then you scale it, hopefully, you start acquiring customers, and then eventually, hopefully, either you become the next big thing and you are now the person who is buying other smaller companies, or you get acquired and then your team kind of stays there, regardless of, if it's an acqui-hire or a flat out just merger, Mm-hmm. Whereas with with you have a lot more kind of skin in the game. Your proof of concept has to be more than just a proof of concept. It has to be a full-fledged product that people are buying, people are returning to buy, and people are consistently buying through loyalty or whatever it might be. And I think you touched on a good thing that you're thinking about doing here, which is focusing on enterprise. I mean, I know that you bring up EK, you bring up I'm spacing on the other company you brought up, but the company that also exists out there that I think is following a lot in those kind of footsteps and has followed a lot of those footsteps is like AlphaCool, where like they were entirely B2B for a good while. They were just in the enterprise server rack market, and then eventually they were like, oh, we have enough machines now where we can bring the cost of consumer down, and now they're making like some of the most like high quality bespoke radiators that you can buy because they have so much B2B experience to make a really good radiator that they just scaled it down to B2C. And I think that the way that you're doing it is, I think, the right way to do it. There's always going to be a B2B consumer, and there's always going to be a company that needs a custom holistic cooling solution. Not every server is the same. Obviously, the rack sizes are universal, like it's whatever that millimeter thread is that you slide the rack into. But at the end of the day, you might just be dealing with someone who has, a 1 or 2 U server rack, as opposed to someone who has an entire warehouse full of completely stuffed racks, So I think that doing it the B2B route, like you mentioned, and then eventually, hopefully, being able to target that, hey, here's $20 off of the consumer product, I think is the way to go about it.
And you bring up a huge point, because we're not trying to boil the ocean here. The reason AlphaCool and another company, Asetek, does really well in our space is because they're licensing, just like you said, the IP. Hardware is always IP. Like, I remember 3 years ago, my advisor was like, "Where's your IP at, Abhi? I don't want you to come into the Upstarts program and start talking." And every single time I started talking about the idea, and I had a romanticizing about the idea and everything. He's like, "All right, by the way, did you guys file your patent yet?" And then he would cut me, and I was like, "Oh shit, he's giving me the runs. I'm taking the blows." But he was right. Because AlphaCool, you brought up a great point. They're making amazing radiators now that have a D5 pump integrated with the radiator. And then it overcomes Asetek patent, where Asetek has the cold plate and the pump on top of the cold plate, which it's all a whole bunch of bobbing and weaving like Muhammad Ali with the IP type of stuff. And it's amazing because your IP goes a long way, the moat you create. But then you have the IP, great. Anyone can have a patent. Yes, anyone can put up an LLC. So do it, right? I hear this all the time. Yeah, sure. You have an LLC. You have a patent. That's great. I know somebody who has a patent. That's great. That's awesome. But now it's time to sell, and that's where it becomes a whole another shit show, selling. And you guys bring up a good point, because Asetek and AlphaCool have an array of amazing patents, and now they can start applying it to different types of markets. And that's kind of what we're doing. We're not trying to boil the ocean. That's not exactly what we're doing. Well, on the B2B route, we're looking at after a specific industry that has a lot of plug and play with the gaming market, the AEC industry, because they create just basically desktop towers. They don't do rack mounted units. So the 360 millimeter radiator, this AIO that we're creating is universally plug and play. But they are looking for even the incremental increases in performance that does save them on data processing costs. Yeah. But we're very open to companies. Like, we know that companies like AlphaCool, Asetek have the ability to come in and figure it out. That's why we got to keep our moat of our IP really strong.
Absolutely. Yeah. At the end of the day, it's just a battle of who has better IP, who has the better, the more fully fleshed out, the actual intellectual idea that's patented and everything like that.
And whoever incentivizes their sales force better, because that sales team who's going out there killing it and they're being incentivized on commission and base, even if they don't believe in selling the product, they'll gain more territory.
Well, I mean, it was like 2 years ago, back when like vapor chambers were like first popping up. Like, that was like, nowadays you can't find any like mid to high range block that isn't like, that's air cooled, at least, that doesn't have some kind of freaking vapor chamber in it that's going to higher end enterprise. It's in 1 or 2 years, it's like if one sales team starts pitching out a vapor chamber, now everybody has to start implementing it and selling it out too.
whoever got the Vapor Shaper into the new Xbox, I don't know what company that is. I'm studying them heavily. It's exactly when one of the biggest computer companies, Dell, bought Alienware. I was like, that's when I was like, oh shit, these guys were in their garage creating custom computers and they just got bought by Dell. That's when I knew. I was like, fuck, if they can do it, maybe we can do it too. Now, I know I'm not trying to compare myself to those people, but it that's a great thing about entrepreneurship. You hear a story and you're like, hey, it might be possible, and that's all you need.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing in the world of entrepreneurship that is not possible. It's more of an attempt to it. It might not work out. I mean, that's the reality of it, but there's nothing that you can't try to pursue behind. But going into one of your points, Luis, that you brought up about like acquisitions and these things. Acquisitions actually do happen quite a bit in hardware based off, just as you talked about, IP. So the acquisition strategies in hardware space is all based off of somebody has IP, they have patents, they're so valuable to another company's growth that they can do the vertical line. Like you talked about with Blue, like your mic is Blue. You can have a really good headset value, but now that we're talking in games and we're communicating within, multiplayer, you need to have a really good mic with it. So that's an easy acquisition. So that is a strategy that some hardware companies do, which is they look at these big companies, these massive companies like a Dell, and they look at what they suck at and what they don't want to spend their resources on. And then they focus their efforts on creating IP and a business around that to then get acquired by that company, Dell, and they create strategic partnerships, investments. Yeah. So that is a route that some hardware companies go. But kind of going off directly into your company, right, Abhi? So what is the next steps for FLUIX? We talked about like the growing pains. We talked about how it went to build out this hardware company, right? Where you're at right now, you talked about going B2B. What's the next steps? Where are you trying to go and take this company?
A great question. And I want people to understand this. We are in the journey right now. So we have our product up on our website for B2C. We're trying to figure out a way to gain more traction. We have a small amount of sales, which is great. Love my customers. The customers out there are freaking amazing to have the opportunity to have a product out there and people are buying. The next step on the B2C route, we're both B2C and B2B. We're a B2B to C, I think that's what it's called. Is
B to all.
all the words, yeah. The next step for us is really building a relationship with the influencer, that trust mechanism. Luis, you brought up a great point. It's like, taking it hard when you send it to Linus Tech Tips and he shits on your product and oh, you didn't review it correctly, Linus. No, Linus, the reason Linus is successful and has 10 million subscribers is because he's the best archetype of what the consumer is. So whatever way he tests it is how the consumer is going to test it, or as close as possible. So that's our next step, is to send our products. So this version, I have a couple of versions here that I've been testing, is a really old version, and we have a new version that we've been hearing back data from the customer saying that, hey, you guys have more aesthetic. You have to put an RGB strip in there. Just want to let you guys know that our next water block does have a addressable RGB onto.
Oh yeah, dude.
Yeah, gotta have the Aura sync, all the different ones.
Yeah, Corsair sync, all that stuff, the IQ, whatever the hell it's called.
Right, and even MSI and everything. So that's one thing that we're rolling out. On the B2B side, we're very early. I don't want to say anything yet, but we've been working with a couple of people to get their ideas, their frustrations together. And right now we're working on how we can create a product that can move to the B2B, that can be applied in a 360 millimeter radiator space in a desktop, that goes after Threadripper CPUs because they're high core count and they're used in the AEC industry for renders. And we're trying to take that TR4 AIO that we're trying to create and then make the aesthetic changes, make the addressable, customizable changes to go to the B2C route. So that's currently what we're trying to work on. A couple of products that we're trying, it's a lot of trial and error, and we'd love from feedback on our website, is we're doing custom liquid cooled pre-builts, kind of like main gear stuff that you see from Origin PC that's been online as tech tips for a whole bunch of times, by the way. Origin, they're right here in Miami in our back door. So we're doing custom liquid cooled computers with the basis that, hey, now that we have a multi-inlet water block, your coolant runs, your custom runs can be even more crazier, or however you want to personalize it, because we are multi-inlet. So what I want to say, and the note that I want to end off of what we're working on, is We're trying, getting data back, most important thing, hearing what the data says, and unconditionally not romanticizing our problem or our product, making the change to what the customer wants. Because in the past, my team knows that I have been, let me just say it this way, romanticizing and becoming in love with the product, but I've let go of that, and I'm ready to make solutions that people are really adhering to. And the only way I can do that is with the data that I'm hearing back.
I respect that. It's hard as a founder to kind of take what like, once again, what's your baby and what you created, right, and then and moving it around. But at the end of the day, like as we talked about, unless you're buying all your product, you're not the most important piece. It's your community and what you build around it. But yeah, I mean, going into kind of the last conversation I wanted to have before we talk about the failure story, how we end all our shows. But I want to talk about esports overall, because what we talked about was like the growth of like for example, Bitcoin created this huge need for GPUs and CPUs and like everything to mine, right? But now we're going into this age of esports, and esports, I mean, we're streaming on Twitch, where obviously there's so many streamers, everybody's in the world of gaming, and it's a hot market, but it's completely decentralized. And what I mean by that is there's so much fragmentation from education to esports, how to stream, how to build your own brand if you want to be a streamer, how tournaments work, how the entry level into them, all these factors. Because of that decentralization, it's going to impact its growth. It's growing really fast, but it's going to hit this plateau very soon. And you can see that from just the entrance in. It's still very restricted. So I just want to talk with you guys, because all three of us enjoy gaming. We love the gaming world. But like, where's this esports world going towards? Because where I'm seeing it, and we've had this conversation with Johnny as well, and like where I really see esports going towards is that all the way from young age, people start getting trained the same way sports work. You have these like high school leagues, then you start building out, and then you have college leagues, and you can build it out, because it requires a certain level of education. Because people don't understand that, like, even in video games, there are certain tactics and strategies you can learn. There's good habits that you need to have. Exercise is super important outside of gaming to come into gaming, to have that stamina and understand how to play in top performance level, mental ability within it. All these factors are now getting researched, and there's like coaches, like we talked about. I mean, in Finland, there's the #1 CS, like just training camp. Like you just learn. Yeah, it's crazy how like these are now getting built out, and it's actually like South Korea is investing into infrastructure just for esports because it's value to the country, right? You can see these fundamentals coming up. So where do you guys see esports going towards? Because it's the Wild West right now. There's so many things that can happen with it. But I'm interested to hear you guys' takes.
Lewis, you don't mind if I go first on this one?
Go for it.
So it's it's the Wild West, just like you said. The funniest thing, and I'll make this point with take it with a grain of salt, I guess. A community's Reddit post, like a Reddit thread, has enough power and influence to change the rules and regulations of an esports league, and we've seen that. The access to coordinators or people that run these leagues. I think I have the Call of Duty League's coordinator or the president of the Call of Duty League on LinkedIn, and have the ability to message her, and people have access. If you have a Reddit thread with your community and you guys are doing articles or we're sending messages and you're like, well, that was some bullshit play on Rainbow Six that I saw, or in Valorant, they should really change that, or that guy is using this, that, and the ability to catch momentum and change rule books is insane. When I'm watching NFL football and I'm like, fuck, they should have never deflated that football, that's some bullshit, doesn't go as far as in esports when I'm running a whole Reddit thread. So the ability to change rules is a freaking amazing, because the power to the players, literally, I think that's GameStop's motto, power to the players.
RIP, by the way.
Oh yeah, RIP, yeah.
The motto to be able to do that is freaking amazing. I'm really interested in seeing how, and with Edgetown really, is seeing how technology can go into changing rule books, like really technology going into it. And we've kind of, the last analogy that I'm going to make is in motorsports. There's a reason you can't use nitrous or liquid nitrogen or any type of these boosting agents in motorsports, because it gives a competitive edge. Maybe you might see that with peripherals, keyboard, mouse, or with type of audio technical technology, or even some of these overclocking stuff that you do with computers, does it give an advantage, an unfair advantage to other people who don't have access to those technologies? I'm really interested in seeing where this goes.
Yeah, I think you raise a good point there with the analogy of like the boost, the cheating and giving that unfair advantage. I mean, to Val's point, I remember back in the day when StarCraft was like the thing. StarCraft 2, I played a good amount of StarCraft 1. I played a decent amount of StarCraft 2 until I realized that I would never be able to beat anybody like after 8 p.m. because that's when the Korean servers turned on, and it was just game over for me after that. So I remember watching a documentary with Idra, who was like one of the best StarCraft players of his time, arguably still one of the best ones ever. And he basically like went through like a day of like what Idra does in a day, right? And it was just like, you know, I wake up in the morning, I have breakfast, I go exercise for like 2 hours, I go for a run. He lived in New York at the time, so he's like, I go run, and he would eat super clean, he would exercise every day, and then he would sit in a chair and practice strats with his team for like 6 to 8 hours, and then he would actually go and play some scrims. So it's like, it's very important. And Val, you bring up this thing of like it's becoming more apparent as kind of we start taking gaming seriously, like as an actual esport. I mean, for like what did Booga, or whatever the heck that kid's name is, what did he win, like $1 million during the Fortnite championship? You know, it's so, you know, and he was on Fallon the next day. So it's like it's being taken more seriously at this point. People who are like, what is this fork knife doing on my ESPN right now? It's like, shut up, dude. Like there's literally millions of dollars being pumped into this right now, and it's a new generation. I mean, I have a nephew who is 4 or 5, and like 2 years ago, he was on Fortnite, or he was on like Valorant. He was playing these games and he would get kills. And like we would always laugh, like me and my brother-in-law, we would like giggle to ourselves at like the fact that like this probably adult, like grown person was sitting on their computer like getting killed by a literal 3-year-old, with a keyboard and mouse. So it's you know, it's the kid's already good at video games. I'm excited to see what he does in the future. So it's this new generational move of like, yes, like it's going to be more serious, going to be taken more seriously, more money's going to get pumped into it, the same way that any sort of child league is. You think of like, you know, T-ball, you think of like, Pee-wee football, you think of like Little League basketball leagues, all this kind of stuff. It's going to be taken more seriously. There's going to be teams that are going to be bringing kids up the ranks and making money, because advertisers, that's how it's going to roll. You know, it's like this election cycle, for example, I didn't watch MSNBC, I didn't watch CNN, I didn't watch, you know, insert any other liberal media you want right here. I didn't watch any of those. Instead, I watched Twitch. I watched Hassan. You know, it's like I was on Twitch for all of my election news. That's where it's going. That's where advertising, that's where all this stuff is going, and it's gonna be a big shift, I think, in the next 5 years. Along with that as well is and you brought this up, it's making sure that no one has an advantage. That's going to be the next big thing, and it's something that the community is kind of being a big part of. In, you know, like in Warzone, for example, the DMR was just absolutely broken.
Now it's the worst thing.
Now it's actually not that bad. Like mid range, it's whatever. We can talk about it as much as we want. But it's not as it's not as ridiculous as it was before, when like you could be halfway across the map and someone could, you know, like 4-tap you and you'd be on your ass. So it's one of those things where like the community, that was a big part of it, because it's like the community was outspoken, they patched it, and then they were like, hey, you literally did nothing. Like, this is still a broken gun. And then within like half the time that they took them to fix it the first time, they fixed it the second time, and this time now it's actually a balanced weapon. Like now it's not like crazy powerful and stuff like that. These sorts of things take so much, it's so much quicker in the gaming community to fix and patch and make these like small incremental changes that affect the everyday living for people, that it's pretty good. I mean, one of my favorite it's not even cheating, it's just like an advantage was I run from time to time, and there's anyone in the running community knows about the shoe, the Nike Next 2%, right? So Nike developed a shoe that they developed for the man who broke the record. He did a marathon in under 2 hours, right? They developed a shoe specifically for him. So it's like a shoe that was like a lot of R&D went behind it to like make the right spring, the right bounce, the right forward trajectory. A lot of money went into making this one shoe, and they made it for him. And he broke the record. He did a marathon in under 2 hours. And then they said, well, all we got to do now is just tweak it a little bit, and then we can mass produce this shoe. It's not a cheap shoe. It's still like $250. But this shoe, literally, the reason it's called the 2% is because it will, no joke, if I ran a mile in 10 minutes, I'm now 2% faster with this one shoe on, like minimum, like 2% quicker just by changing out my shoes because of the way they designed it. It was such a drastic like improvement that they started like the New York City Marathon, the LA Marathon, the Chicago Marathon, all the big marathons in the US were talking about banning the shoe from the marathons because it literally gives an unfair advantage to anybody who's wearing it. So like if I had like a pair of like really good Brooks on, which is an amazing pair of running shoes for the marathon, if I had a nice pair of Brooks on, it doesn't matter. I could spend $500 on a pair of custom soled Brooks. I would still get beat out by a dude wearing a $250 pair of shoes that he just picked up from Nike.com. You know, it's having these kind of unfair advantages that take a long time to process. Whereas with the gaming, now it's like, here you go. Now it's everybody has this, especially in actual esports. We're talking like you sit down in front of a computer in an arena where everybody has the same computer, the same monitor. The only difference is maybe your mouse and maybe your keyboard at the end of the day, you know, and your headset, obviously, like little things like that change. But I think, like you said, it's a Wild West. There's a lot of stuff that needs to kind of happen in order to level out the playing field for everybody. But I'm excited to see where it goes as far as the mass adoption and advertising and all that stuff into it.
Yeah, I mean, the more money that gets into it, I think the more standardization that's going to happen. But as you guys brought up, there's a lot more fluidity and it's easier to move it around. But as we get to a certain point, they are going to have to start standardizing things. Like if you're going to play in this tournament, you cannot have above this or below this. Or you can have below it, but you need to know that you're at a disadvantage already off the bat, because obviously they can't just kick people out. But I think that's what's going to happen with it. So like there's going to be caps, and like as you brought up, Bobby, like that's a concern, but also kind of a good point for like my technology is like if it does get banned, that's easy PR that I can use to get into the casual gaming market really fast. But the ultimate goal is obviously not to have it get banned. Like I want it to be adding a new layer to it that makes gaming more real, but every esports player then would have to have it, so it actually creates more mass adoption. But these are things that has to be looked at because you cannot give someone even the slightest advantage. Like, and it's funny because Nick put in the into the chat right now, like having like a 144 hertz monitor. Like, yeah, I mean that it does add a lot of impact. Like just frames and all these kinds of things and how FPS and all these other factors to it. Like in an FPS game, every millisecond matters. How fast you see someone matters. Hearing somebody matters. Everything matters. So if you're giving an advantage to somebody else, and like let's say a whole team stacked and they just have more funding behind them, of course they should be winning more tournaments depending on their skill, just because of added layers. So I do think that's going to be a challenge in the esports world. I'm excited to see what they do and how they balance it out. But at the same time, I think this training aspect of it and teaching strategies and that part, I think will have more impact than just the technology behind it. Because it's the same thing in like when I was playing baseball in high school, we played against some scrub teams and like Chula Vista, these guys like didn't have like good equipment or anything like that, but they would have like their wood bats and just freaking hit home runs for days and just murk teams. Just because they're just old school, they had strategy behind how they played scrappy baseball, and they would beat out these teams that have a bunch of money, like Cathedral that has, I mean, it's a private school and they literally can give scholarships for people to come play baseball, and they had like the #1 draft pick that year. That's kind of the difference though, right? And I think they're gonna have to figure that out for the esports world overall, to make it a lot better. Any other takes from you guys when it comes to esports before we kind of close out the show for today?
Yeah, I mean, just to bring close to my thoughts, I love hearing you guys first because, Louise, you brought up a great point. That 2%, I think there was a shoe in basketball, right? That made you jump higher or whatever. NBA banned it. And Val, you brought up a great point. The consumer market was like, hell yeah, I'm going to go take that to pickup games, right? You still get your ass beat like, on the court, but yeah, hey, man, I got that shoe. So it's amazing in a hardware aspect if you're a hardware company, because it's not war. Esports is not war. If I'm not talking about the US government, but if the US government has an exosuit and we go to war with a different company and we're just obliterating them, yes, it's war, it's horrible. But the war, unless it's under the Geneva Convention, allows it. But the esports is Geneva Convention all the freaking time. You know what I mean? I think Val, me and you are going after the same people, which is esports arenas, really adopting this type of technology. With me, it's yes, it's a little bit of performance, but it's not as performance as when Linus Tech Tips did that video with Shroud, where he had the 144 hertz monitor with 360 monitor. I bet you MSI, freaking Acer, and all those companies went after esports arenas on masses. Hey, look at this video, a collateral video from Linus that let's make this point happen. With me, it's taking the computer under your desk and putting it up so esports arenas can leverage the real estate on their walls to increase audience retention or to create another type of gear that motivates and incentivizes the team. Yes, it's a soft sell. It's a hypothesis that we're currently testing. But with Edge Sound, I'm interested on how this can potentially change rule books, bro. That's where I really want to see this. So, yeah, man, I'm going to stay tuned. I can't wait for updates.
Awesome. So now to close out the show, as I kind of hinted at earlier, the way that we close out every single show is we have the guest provide a failure story. And the reason why we always end the shows with failure stories is because, especially in the world of entrepreneurship, but even just in personal development overall, everybody deals with failures if they're pushing themselves. And it's hard to go through failures, but it's important to understand how to go through them, how to reflect, because that's how we grow as humans and that's how we lead to success. Success doesn't come alone. Comes with a bunch of hurdles that are failures. So to end the show, we would love to hear a failure story from you. Anything you would like to share to the community and providing some value. I have a couple questions to add on at the very end, but the floor is yours to share a nice little failure story.
Yeah, failure stories. You probably ask me a month from now, you probably hear this everywhere. A month from now, I have another story to add on to this, and that's kind of how it works, right? With me, I think it's pretty. I like to be upfront about it and bring stuff out into the limelight a little bit, and just to be kind of bring this issue out with the Asian community. I'm Asian. I'm from India. You grow up in a community where academics is the top. Either education or you don't go about it. So I want to bring this out to other people who look at this, especially other Asians in the community. Yes, when you're in uni, you got to bring those grades home, right? So academically, that's one of my failure stories. I wasn't doing well academically at all. And I'd like to share that entrepreneurship saved me because I figured it out. And the earlier you figure it out in uni, which I have a different look about university now, uni is literally discipline. There's a reason why military veterans, if they went to uni before the military and after the military, when they had discipline instilled in them at the highest level, which is our military, they come back to university and they kill it. If I remember all the veteran friends, I have a huge respect for the veteran community that went to my school. It's like, I'd love to partner with them and do group projects with them because their discipline was on point. They gave no fucks. They were just like, all right, man, let's get this done. Let's make it happen. And entrepreneurship did that for me. Not to that extent, but I was looking forward to, there's a small group of people in every single school that go to class and are working on, I don't know, if you're looking at base level chemistry class, you're doing stoichiometry, and then 45 minutes later, you're taking an investor meeting call where you're selling your company for millions of dollars. Yes, there's people like that at your university right now doing stuff like that. It's the coolest stuff, right? So my whole thing was, hey, school is just a means of like a video game. Going through getting your camos or grinding out camos. I do that now on my YouTube channel. I'm grinding camos. School is like grinding camos. You know what I mean? I don't want to bring it to that aspect, but I kind of brought in that like, hey, let me grind this out. Learn the discipline of school, wake up those 2 hours early, study my ass off, get a good grade on this test, and now I can go work on my company. That's literally how I went about it. And my whole failure story is I wasn't doing well academically at all before I found entrepreneurship because I found this sense of purpose in me that told me, hey, I got to finish this out right to become an engineer. That way the reason I became an engineer is to work on my own products and create technical solutions. And the way I did it, I have another story, but academically, my failure story is I don't even want to say my GPA now because there's people that went to uni with me that knew I was fronting on GPA for the longest amount of time. GPA wasn't there. No research lab would take me. I think to get to graduate school, you need a 3.0, right, Val?
Yep.
I mean, you did graduate school, right? So yeah, graduate school wouldn't take me. So, but I looked at it and I found a way that my best GPA days or my best times that I did well in school is when I was going hard in my company. And the moment of change in I guess in my failure stories, when I had one of the lowest GPAs, I was getting kicked out of my college, the College of Engineering at UCF. It was the final semester before I got kicked out. I really had to get my shit together. That was the same semester I went through the UCF I-Corps program. Literally right when the start of everything. After that, I was able to raise my GPA like, I think 1.2, raise it by 1.2, which was absolutely insane, unheard of because of what we were going through. And I have to thank a couple of people. I have to thank my co-founder in that, Dr. Castillo. He was doing his PhD, so he told me about different nuances with different ways of solving academic problems, translate to technical problems. I have to thank a couple of friends as well. I'm not going to name them, there's too many to name. Research groups at the university, clubs and cohorts and mentors, because otherwise I wouldn't have finished my degree. And to kind of circle everything back, the degree was important because yes, I understand piece of paper. I'm not trying to make that statement here. I'm trying to make the statement that the degree was important because it allows you set a goal for yourself and you finish it. That's what I meant. So to equate is setting a goal for yourself and finishing it. There's a lot of times where I couldn't finish that. And now I look back at it, I'm like, dang, I don't want to undervalue the degree, but the ability to learn from how much you learned of creating your own company is so much more impactful. So I guess my failure story is really about how to overcome lackluster academics and how entrepreneurship saved me in that aspect.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's really important for a lot of people because I hear it all the time from students, and actually it's even more powerful in like the engineering department, CS departments, but like the focus on a GPA, I think it just consumes people too much because it takes away from the reality of the real world. Your GPA, yeah, don't get me wrong, if you want to do grad school and these things, it is important. Like, yeah, you have to have a higher GPA, the more scholarships you can get for grad school. Grad school ain't cheap, so you want to have as good of a GPA and good standardized test scores as possible. But that GPA, it is very discipline based because I guarantee you, those people that have very high GPAs are very theoretical. They understand the theory of everything, but they don't have a lot of application knowledge. The real markets care about application. They care about your experience. They do not care about your GPA. And that's why a lot of tech companies are removing even bachelor's degree requirements and all these things, because they want to see that you can do it. They don't care that you understand it. They want to see you can actually physically do it. But to tie off your story, how was this experience you had, right? How did it lead to where you are right now, this moment today, right? So you learned this discipline factor, but how did it get you to where you're at right now?
Yeah, it's total. I can change the conversation really quickly on that because you brought it up. There's a metric that society goes by to test effectiveness of that individual, right? The metric is GPA, credit score, the amount of money you make, or there's different evaluations, right? I figured it out that the real key to happiness is give a fuck what those metrics are. Really, to just give a fuck, like not care and mind my language, because it's really the happiness goal is what do you feel of your passion coming through? So right now when people ask me and they're telling me, stuff like credit score, you can't go to a bank and get a mortgage for your house. Yes, you should probably work on that. Yes, but it's only if that is within your passions of doing it to the happiness. Don't allow someone else to create that happiness for you. And that's where GPA consumes everybody on that small scale in college, because it's like, holy crap, a company won't see value in me if my GPA is horrible. No, find the value within yourself, find the problem you want to solve, and you'll find your place in this. So that's kind of where it led to me now, because I realized that, yes, those things are important. I'm not going to say they're not, but if your goal is not to be subject to a metric that you have no care about, I have no care about GPAs or anything like that. And if your goal is like, okay, some people are like, let me let society judge me based on how much money I have. That's not even a metric now. I think my metric now, where I am allowing other people to judge who I am, is how well I'm solving the problem. and that metric is subjective to the person that I'm either solving the problem for or someone who doesn't have that problem. So nowhere near success at this point, probably not for a long time, to where I consider myself successful, not compared to other people. All I know is I'm happy where the journey is right now. I have an amazing team, and I'm just grateful for what we were able to do so far.
Got it. And the last thing we always want to end it with is other people are going through failure right now as well, right? Failure is something that unfortunately society doesn't talk about enough, and it's hard on a lot of people, and they don't really know that journey to go about it. So, what would be your advice to anybody who's currently dealing with failure?
Yeah, first of all, do stuff like this. When you know your failures are held in, you're like, oh, you don't want to show it. It's kind of like a naked body. You don't want to show it or something like that. No, bring it out. Talk to people, because the funniest thing is, in this group of people, when we talk about each other's failures, there's a level of understanding. The first step is to bring it out, talk about it. Yes, it's going to be embarrassing as hell. Yes, there's going to be people that judge you. Do it a group of people that don't exactly judge, and go off of your own metric. Is kind of where I can only speak for myself. The own metric for myself is, it's kind of like the Joker's face. How big is that grin up to my chin? I guess I should start writing some marks on my chin, because that's probably
be careful with that one.
I'm probably gonna go off of that metric. So yes, that was a very hardcore analogy, but find your own metric is what I'm going after.
Got it. No, I appreciate that. I mean, like I said, I think a lot of people share the failure that you personally experienced and the journey that you're going on, and I think it's very important, as we brought up, to talk about it, have open conversations about it. I mean, subtle plug, that's exactly why we have Celebrating Failure on our platform, for that exact reason, because we want to have these conversations, and we want to make people understand that everybody's journey is their own, and as you brought up, it's important to measure what you want to measure it for yourself. Don't look at extrinsic things. Look at what you want to value as happiness and how you pursue it that way. It'll make you more driven behind it. It'll provide more opportunities behind it. And at the end of the day, you're the one who defines your own success and happiness. So if you're pursuing the right realm, it's a lot better that route than having other people tell you what you're supposed to be doing, because that, after a while, does drain you down. But is there anything you would like to plug, giving the floor, your company, anything else you would like to plug to close out today's show?
Yeah. If you guys want to go check out our products, go to FLUIXengineering.com. We created the world's first multi-inlet water block. So if you're a PC enthusiast doing a custom liquid loop, go check it out. We have AM4 water blocks, Intel water blocks for LGA, and we're working on a new Threadripper water block as well. We also have custom pre-built computers for anyone that's looking for a custom rigid tubing computer that comes out of the box for gaming. We have one that's called the FLUIX Vortex right now, has an i5-10600 overclocking ready computer. So go to FLUIXengineering.com if you want to see the next gen in liquid cooling, and keep tabs on us on social media.
Awesome, man. I appreciate you being on the show today. It was a great conversation. We, as always, will be doing a game stream later today, just to have a conversation. Excited to have you potentially on and play with us, play some Warzone and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, great conversation. Hope we can continue this later down the line. In a couple months from now, we can have you on the show again. We can talk both of where we're at with our ventures, and then continue the conversation on Hardtech. But it's been a great closeout. Thank you, everybody, for tuning into the Brew. That's it for today.
Yeah. Thank you for being on, Abhi. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Lewis. Thank you, Nick. And thank you, Vel. Really appreciate it.